We're talking Penn State University, Hollie, and 3 flashbacks.
We're really excited to be competing in state and to have the opportunity to come compete against a team like this at Pitt. But we are definitely focused on the end of the year and what we're going to achieve at the end of the year. So we're making strides in the weight room, in our practices, to get ready for our invite in a few weeks. And then ultimately, we're going to get ready for Big Tens, and we're really excited about this season.
On October 25, 2025, Penn State University visited the University of Pittsburgh, Pitt, for a college dual meet. And I was a timer in lane 5. And then after the meet, I got to visit with Hollie Bonewit Cron.
How's the recruiting going?
The recruiting's great. So we have gotten on the front end now of this 2027 class since we've been on staff for 2 years now, and the way our recruiting cycles work. So we're really happy with what we have, not only committed, but who we're continuing to talk to and who we're looking at down the road. So our recruiting is getting pretty aggressive here.
You had some good stars.
Yeah.
Tell me about your stars.
Yeah, Mariano Lazzarini, he's a senior on our team from Chile, and he broke 2 of the pool records here. So the 100 breaststroke and 200 breaststroke. These are some of the best times he's done this season and in past seasons. We've also had a lot of really good success from our other stars that is in our upper leadership, but we're seeing a lot of our freshmen step up to the plate too, to really stand toe-to-toe with our upperclassmen.
Awesome. Could I ask you one other question?
Of course.
Football coach left, or was dismissed. Does that impact the athletic department? How does that happen? What does it feel like in Happy Valley these days?
It's not the happiest valley, but we're still really happy. No, we really admired what James did for our entire athletic department. But we do see that Pat Kraft has great leadership, wants a change in our football leadership. We respect that and certainly want to support all of our sports, including football. So we'll get a new coach down the road, and we'll see where that takes our football program.
Very good. Hey, have a good season.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Are you traveling anywhere over break?
Well, no, we're going to be staying in State College, but we go to Army next. We'll have our invite at Ohio State, and then we'll break for the holidays.
Good.
Pitt won the meet. They were very impressive, setting a couple school records, and congratulations to Coach Chase Creetler and Pitt Panthers. Now we'll flash back to Hollie's first year at Penn State when she addressed the group at the Eastern States Coaches Clinic.
Well, I appreciate y'all being here. I just rolled in about 20 minutes ago. We had a recruiting weekend, a big Penn State football game yesterday, which was awesome, beating up on those Kent State whatever they are. It was a good time. It was my second Penn State football game ever, so it was pretty cool. We got on the field with those guys. So, but my name's Hollie Bonewit Cron. I'm gonna take you through some things. Still waiting on an answer from my compliance office to see if I can talk more about Penn State or not. So there's some recruiting rules here that I think I could tell you guys, but like talking about Penn State, but I can't do it with the parents and the athletes. So it's good. It's just a little sticky. I had these great Nittany Lion heads on my slideshow, and I just took them off. So imagine that they're there. But I'm going to take you through my coaching staff and really like my trajectory, just kind of show you where I've been. I'm originally from Plains, Ohio. I used to say Athens, Ohio, until some guy named Joe Burrow lived there. And now I say that I'm actually from the Plains, Ohio, which is where I'm really from. I went to college at Ohio University, and then I swam there for 4 years. Then I went on to graduate school at Georgia Southern and studied sports psychology there. When I was at Georgia Southern, I was a GA. Halfway through my second year, the head coach got let go. They promoted me to head coach with no assistant, and that was kind of fun, handling like 5 stopwatches. I'm sure a lot of you can appreciate that, right? And so we went to conference, and then at that time, Florida was bringing their non-SEC athletes to the meet. And so I saw Anthony Nesty on deck. He was an assistant at the time. And I called my brother because my brother swam at Florida and was an All-American there. I said, hey, Rob, I think Anthony's on deck. He's like, go talk to him. I was like, oh, okay. And so I went up to Anthony, and he said, we're looking for another coach. And so I was Greg Troy's first female assistant at Florida. And so I started there in 2002. And what was really unique about that situation is that was Ryan Lochte's freshman year. So he was a freshman coming in as barely a junior national athlete, then became the Olympian and the world record holder that he became. So from there, I had met my husband in college. We swam together at OU before they dropped the men's program. And then through our time at Florida, we got married, and he's an attorney. So he got a job down in Miami, Florida that took us down there. And so I didn't have a job. I then decided, and I didn't really put it up here because it's kind of a blip on my job trajectory. I just ran out of room, if I'm being honest. But I volunteered at the University of Miami. At the time, Christy Chatrunas was the head coach there. Trisha Harm at the time is the assistant. And so through that, I was able to stay with coaching. And then Nova Southeastern started a brand new program. They had a 50-meter long course pool with a diving well. It was beautiful. It was Division II, and I threw my name in the hat, and they hired me on. So for 1 year, I was recruiting, and that's all I was doing, recruiting athletes. And one of the unique things that I did at Nova is because we didn't have an existing team, I had to think outside the box. So I had those recruits stay with the volleyball players, the women volleyball players, and the men's soccer team. So they could actually stay in the residence hall versus staying in a hotel for those nights that they were visiting. So they could at least get the experience of what student athletes were experiencing, okay, at Nova. So then 7 years later, we ended up being fourth on both sides of Division II. And then we had 12 national champions. And we actually have 2 of those champions being inducted this fall. In a couple weeks, I'm going down there to celebrate with them. So long story short, love my Division II experience. Nothing will ever replace that experience, but my heart was really in Division I. So when Miami of Ohio made the decision, after Pete Lindsay decided to retire, they made a decision to combine the program. And when they did that, I was really attracted because my history had been with combined programs. That's what I wanted to stay with. So I applied for Miami, and I got that job. So that first year was extremely challenging. You had 2 separate teams that didn't necessarily want to be together in the holistic sense, but we eventually became that, and we created a culture that thrived on that. And so then what ended up happening was after those 8 years, so 7 at Nova, 8 at Miami, the men, we just this past year came off our 4th consecutive MAC championship. We had 5 over the course of 6 years. And then our women were second for the first time in 10 years with our first female Olympian from Germany. So, and again, I have to follow my heart. I really wanted to be back in Power 5. As we all know, that's more or less Power 4 now. So that's what people like to joke about. And when Penn State came open, it was really a no-brainer. And there's so many factors that went into that decision. It was really hard to leave Miami. We had a great network, not only friends, but with the team. We set so many great things up. But we really wanted to make that move, not only for my personal career, but our family. So it made a lot of sense. And so my husband and I have been married, I got to do some math. It's like 17 years, 18 years. We have 3 kids. One's going to be almost 12. She's in middle school. The middle one is 10. She's in 5th grade. So we have a 5th grader, a 6th grader. And then we have our little guy who's 4.5. What's kind of really interesting about this that I don't always tell, but it kind of, I think, surprises people is my husband works remotely. So he works in Chicago. So Monday through Friday, he flies to Chicago. Now he flies. When we were at Miami, he would drive. So this is much easier. This is also something that went into the decision, the fact that we have a direct flight to Chicago. So if he flies out on Monday mornings, comes back on Thursday nights or Friday mornings, and that's what we do. And that's how we make it work. And so I have nannies for days. I have spreadsheets like crazy to make sure that our nannies can come in, take care of the kids while I get to do really cool things like be here today. So questions about that? I know that's really long-winded. I apologize, but that is something that I think is important, especially some of the details that went along with that. And I will tell you that the majority of my career, besides the early part of my career, but Nova was a brand new program from scratch. Miami was combining for the first time. And as you ask a lot of the athletes at Penn State, they were ready for a bit of a change. And so I'm excited that we're coming in and creating that culture of leadership. So I finally put together my staff, which was really fun. Took all summer to do it, but we got it done. I brought one coach with me from Miami, Sean Schimmel. He was literally with me for a very brief period of time, 1 year, not even. He arrived in November of last year, and we have worked well famously, okay? He's been at some really great places, including Arkansas, LSU, Harvard, Maryland. He was at Maryland when they dropped the program. He has a lot of experience. And most recently, he was at Georgia before he came to Miami. He was at Georgia coaching the pro group. So he was working there with Jack Bowerly and company. Funny story about Ethan Curl. He applied for a job with me at Miami. He ended up going to IUPUI. Shortly thereafter, he went to Ohio University. I couldn't figure out why all these recruits were starting to visit OU and starting to go to Ohio University, the same ones we were recruiting. Well, I figured it out. It is Ethan Curl, so he needed to be on my staff at Penn State. So he's really good, really dynamic. Like I said, we just got off of a recruiting visit. This is our second of 4 that we're having this fall. And he's somebody who's just a go-getter. So, and I'll talk about kind of with the groups that they're coaching after this. Nicole McConnell, she just came from Texas A&M. So when they had a transition on their staff, she was looking for a place to land, and she's been great. She's been in the office for about a week. And then we had Ryan Sullivan, who came from the University of Mary Washington, and also swam at Bloomsburg. So not only is he from Pennsylvania, which is really good for us in recruiting, but he knows, that D2, D3 landscape as well, with this coming down to D1 to be able to marry that all together. My diving coaches, this is really unique. A lot of coaches, a lot of programs only have one diving coach. We had a diving coach in the GA last year. They upgraded that. We have 2 diving coaches, the head and the assistant. So Bob Smith was my adversary when I was not only an athlete at OU, but coaching at Miami, because he was the head diving coach at Eastern Michigan for 25 years. And now he's with us. So again, really good coach, really, really strong in coaching diving. That's what I wanted. And then Bill Williams just came from Towson. So that's kind of the history of not history, but who I have. Now, I'll get to how we coach practices, but Sean's going to be the 200 and down in sprint group, okay? I'm going to be the 200 and up, but middle distance, and I'll show you what that looks like in a little bit. Ethan is going to be our distance coach, and then Nicole and Ryan are going to be mixing and matching depending on what practice it is. So on Tuesday, Thursday, she comes with me. Every other day, she goes with Sean, and then Ryan's just the opposite. So something that I like to go through with our athletes, they go slide by slide for like a 2-hour meeting. And then also our recruits is going to be some of our expectations, okay? So a lot of the expectations that I walk them through, and this is just part of, I think, important with college swimming, with any swimming, club swimming, high school swimming, honesty, integrity, respect, okay, all those things. With priorities, I do a fun little upside down triangle. Yep, I have it here. And then I always get the engagement of the student athletes, okay, and of the recruits. I ask them, what go to the top 2 points? For us, that's academic and athletics. And I always ask them, what do you think goes down there, right? And then they have to think. And just recently, one of the recruits said, have fun. And I was like, yeah, that's right. That's your social life. So when I talk about the social life, I say, and I'm very black and white and honest, I say, this isn't just going downtown and drinking. This is staying up too late scrolling through TikTok. This is staying up too late playing video games. I say, I see you Fortnite players. And then it gets a little laugh out of them. And then maybe it's binging on Netflix. It's staying up too late. It's not getting sleep. It's not getting recovery. That's what I consider going into social life. And then what I show them is typically when we start to see that you're doing well in practice, you might be having too much of a social life. Typically your academics go down. So when we start to see that, we start tapping into that and asking them some really hard questions. What are you doing? Take us through every night and how you're spending your time. And really, the time management piece is so important, and the resources that we give them to be able to manage that. All right. So again, going back to these expectations. So we spend a little bit of time on those priorities, then we go into responsibility, accountability. I just want our athletes to be honest. I want them to tell us if they screwed up. All right. We're going to work through it. We're going to find a way to make sure that they are accountable, but they got to be forthcoming. The commitment, the appearance is where I always have fun with them. And I say, well, I'm not going to tell you what to wear. Well, actually, I will. Because when we go in the weight room, we're going to wear the same clothes. When we travel, we're going to be in the attire that we prescribed. I tell them whenever we're doing a team function, we're not wearing pro team apparel. We're not wearing another college. We're wearing Penn State. And on a Sunday, if you want to go cheer on your team, fine. Go dress head to toe, whatever it is that you want to wear. But when we're with our team activities, it's going to be Penn State. Unity, so we're always coming together, right? We're family. We're going to have our little squabbles, but we need to come together and be united. Diversity, inclusion, I harp on this a lot. They have to be able to accept each other no matter what, no matter what. Loyalty, and then crying that we are, because that's so obviously one of our mottos, okay? Any questions about that? Awesome. My team and training details. My formatting's a little off because I had a nice little lion head over there. It was nice and balanced, and then I had to take it off. All right. So my training philosophy in general is going to be structured yearly planning. So we're very structured. We like to plan. We don't just like to wing it. All right. Sometimes I walk on deck with Craig, and he would just not have practice written. He would just verbally read it out, and I'd have to like scribble it down as like a 25-year-old. And I'm like, oh my God, what did you just say? But anyway, we structure it, we plan it, and it focuses on the individual athlete needs while honoring the team culture and direction. Okay, that really just means no one athlete's going to supersede what the team goals are. And we're working through that now. We have most of our athletes put in their groups and where they need to go and how they move groups. We have a couple athletes. I got a text later today where it changed their group. But we've had conversation. They know it's coming, so I don't like to surprise them. I used to really have to answer this question a lot just because after, working at Florida, being a swimmer back in the late 90s, we were definitely given a lot of quantity, right? A lot of volume. So I have to explain to them, everyone's going to get quality and quantity, but how are we going to do it? So you have your sprinters who are going to need to come up a little bit on volume, all right? Some that threshold work that's going to help them finish a 200 freestyle or 200 stroke. Or you flip it over to distance and they need to have the quality to be able to come down to possibly a 200 freestyle, for example. Maybe a 400 IM, which is a little bit more like a sprint too. So that's where we kind of mix a little bit of it. So I want to make sure the sprinters know that they're going to have to get a little bit of that threshold training and come up in volume just a tick. But then your distance athletes, they're not just going to be, kicked in the teeth with all this volume. They're going to get some short stuff too. All right, get the question about what the vision is. It's open-minded. What I mean by that is athletes can come ask us any questions, and we're not just going to give them a bullshit answer, okay? We're just going to basically say, well, this is our plan. This is how we're doing it, and this is, the explanation behind it. And 9 times out of 10, that solves everything. But you just got to explain it for them. They want to know, and they're curious, And it focuses on the student-athlete needs and overarching goals, so that will be the team goals, okay, while maintaining AT standards and expectations. Again, that goes back to we're not going to have favorites and we're not going to allow the fastest athletes to take precedence over anybody else, all right? We're going to train all together, and high tide raises all boats. I think that's how that goes. And then this is where I engage the athletes a little bit more when I ask them, how many times have you ever had a coach tell you to not breathe off your walls? And inevitably, everyone raises their hand. All right, and I'm going to ask it to the athletes I talked to in an hour here, okay? And then I say, well, that's what I expected. How many of you had a coach tell you that twice? And they all inevitably raise their hand. I say, it comes back to this. If a coach tells you to make a change, make the change. You're doing it for a reason. So I really harp on that a lot with our athletes too. So, and I'm rolling through this a little bit quick because I kind of wanted to just do a question and answer. It sounds like that's been the theme. But basically, these are the trading groups. So you're going to have Sean focusing here on the 50s, 100s, okay? What we do is we put the breaststrokers in with the speed group, all right? That's something that he and I are both very adamant about, of making sure we preserve breaststroke by putting them with our 200 and down and speed athletes. And then this will be a 200 IM. I kind of forgot the 2 there, but that will be where the 200 IMers go. So in that... like I said, 200 and down, but mid-D and spring. Mid-D 200 and up, so this is going to be basically your 200 flyers, backsurfers, and freestylers. They're going to all come with me. And then I'm going to also be focusing on 4 a.m. and 500. I'll get to what those days look like here in a hot second. And we might be coming down to 100, especially when you're talking about relays and everything. And then distance is going to focus on these events, but they've got to have that one right there, all right, to be considered a distance athlete. We do have some athletes here come over, not too often and never on a mile practice if they just need a little more volume. All right, typically we more often see that in some of our women versus our men, so that may be something where they need to get a little more volume. So we'll have the 200 freestyle, 500 freestyle, mile, and if any of them is from 400 IM, they come over to me for 2 days a week. And this is going to be our schedule, and it's going to be really hard to see in the back, maybe even the front too, but I'll take you through it. So we're going to be in the water Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 6 a.m. And we'll go, sprinters will be going until 7:20, and then they hit the weight room. So we work in power in the water, and then we go power in the weight room. That's going to be racks and equipment and all kinds of good stuff. Middle distance on Monday mornings, they're going to do freestyle threshold. We used to call that a stress set back in the day when I was at Florida, but I call it freestyle threshold. These 2 mornings are stroke threshold. Okay, so that's where we're going to be focusing on a lot of stroke, and I'm talking like tight intervals. I even had that question. So when you go back to the vision with it being open-minded, I naply say very respectfully, you know, why do we do these efforts on such tight intervals? I said, I'm building the back end of your 200. That is why, you know, and this is how we do it. And I explained it to him, and he's like, okay. Like, and that's all he needed was just the explanation. And then he said, well, it wasn't my question. I said, oh, so you're just asking me for a friend? And then we had a good laugh for practice. No. And at distance, I said I join middle distance here on these mornings. But then on Wednesday morning, it's going to be a mile and a challenge with the practice there. And then we're going to do some pulling and kicking here, make sure they're getting some kick stuff. I didn't put divers on here because I'd literally just splice this off what I show the team and all that good stuff. And then in the afternoons, we ask them to do the bands of mobility right before practice. Springers are going to be in the water at 3:05. I know that's a little unconventional, but we got to fit 20 hours into this week, okay? And that's the way we do it to make sure that we are hitting those hours and not going over. So it's 3:05 to 5, and we're working on threshold, freestyle stroke. These 2 afternoons, we're going to be doing a lot of underwater work, okay? So that we're hitting those legs. Here it's easy fast, here it's VO2 max. Over here it's going to be threshold gab, but now it's freestyle 2 IM, depending on what they swim. And then on Wednesdays, we're going to do some recovery stuff. Middle distance. On Monday, Friday afternoons, they're going to get to go play on the racks, which is kind of fun. And we do socks and we do cords and chutes, parachutes that is. So they get a little bit of fun with that. Okay, it's hard work. They're going off the blocks, but they get their speed work in there. And then Tuesday, Thursday afternoons, they're going to be 400 IM or what I call hybrid. Hybrid is anyone who's a middle distance athlete that doesn't swim IM. So they're going to be working on 200 pace or 500 pace, depending on who they are. I had Nicole helping me on these afternoons because these are 2 entirely different practices. I don't make a hybrid practice and then say, let's just switch it over and just, you know, change that freestyle to IM. They're completely different. So I need to have a coach like her be able to manage that. And then on Wednesday afternoons, we're going to do recovery, but we will be in the weight room. So up here, and I'm jumping around, I apologize, guys. Spreaders are the weight room Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, middle distance and distance are in the weight room in the afternoons before they get in the water. Then distance is going to be doing VO2 max. Ethan and Sean a little bit. They deal with the color system, right? For John Urbanchek designed. I don't use colors. That's not what Greg Troy did. So I wasn't taught that way, but I do understand it. I just don't use it. So he's going to be purple on this afternoon, red on this afternoon. For those of you that do understand colors, this is going to be blue right here. Okay, and that's going to be some 500 work. And then here we're just going to be doing some towers, chutes, and socks. So not the racks, but the power towers, all right, where you go a little bit further on those. And then they're ready to join us for recovery here. And then we have our diver schedule kit there as well. So middle distance and distance combine on Monday mornings, combine on Wednesday afternoons, and then we all combine on Saturday when we don't have the meet. Well, I mean, combine we have meet, of course, but when we're doing the test set, like we did yesterday morning, we're going to be 7 to 9 in the water doing that test set. I know some of you have probably heard of this set, but Greg did this a lot. 850s, 4 on 130, 2 on a minute, 2 on 50. All dive, all fast. It really helps me see where they fall off, if they fall off, to know where they're at with their conditioning and their fitness levels. And I do it, periodically throughout the season to kind of get a check on them. We report times too. And then yesterday we did a 50 off the blocks, 2 75s off the blocks, and then 3 100s off the blocks. And it went stroke, stroke free, stroke free, stroke. So that's what we did yesterday morning. And it's something that I really haven't done a lot previously. We're building in a meeting here. We're going to meet with the team. I think even now more so than ever, you got to talk to these athletes and you got to hear what they have to say, and then they get to answer questions, and it's great. Excuse me, we had a meeting 2 weeks ago, not yesterday because we had recruits and we had to shuffle them off to get to some stuff. But 2 weeks ago, we answered a lot of questions. And I was able to give them information like this year, we're not going on a training trip. It was too much of a gut punch when we walked in and no training trip was planned. And so we didn't want to, for lack of a better way to say it, half-ass it. Because what we were finding is that we could find a hotel and we found a pool, but the divers couldn't be there. They had to be over here somewhere. And the hotel was way further away than what we wanted. So we said, scrap it. Let's go ahead and do, the long game, and let's try to plan it for the future. Maybe go somewhere really cool instead of Florida where it was in the past. Maybe go to Hawaii or Puerto Rico or somewhere else that's pretty cool. So, and I know Waikiki, I just saw that on social media, is redoing their pool or refurbishing it. I don't know if y'all saw that, but that was pretty cool. Okay. Any questions about that? Yeah.
You have a pretty unique pool situation. How do you prioritize, like, what groups go where, on what days, and what kind of work?
Yeah. I love that question. I like how you said that. We do have a unique pool situation. So if you don't know the Penn State pool, there's a lot of history with it, but there's 6 short course yard lanes, 6 short course meter lanes inside with a separate diving well. And then outside, we have a beautiful 50-meter pool, and that's what we maximize the most. And we've been talking with our aquatics personnel to extend that even longer. So we're going to look at bumping up the water temperature, not too hot because we know that that's going to spike their heart rates, but be able to be out there even in the chillier temperatures. So we're looking at hopefully being out there until December, possibly January. We'll see. The athletes were kind of looking at me like I had 4 heads when I said that, but we're going to make it safe for them. But we do want to be able to spread out. When we get to the point where we all have to be indoors, we're working through that and seeing how we're going to manage it. May have to just kind of figure out our practice times just a tick, but we all like being together, so we don't like being separate too much. Now, what I will tell you with how we're doing it right now, in the mornings, sprinters are going to be inside on these Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings. Middle distance and distance are outside, and they're doing long course. That's the beauty of it. So I walked in on my interview, and I started looking around, and I looked up at those bank of lights, and those bank of lights were over the Sarney Tennis Complex, but there were some lights that were opposite, and they were facing towards the pool. I said, well, how do we get those on? And they're like, no one knew. Okay. So I called Tommy, and I was like, he's our facility guy. And I was like, how do we figure this out? It's in a basement that has a sign on the door that says asbestos is possible because this building was built at the, whenever time frame it was. And there's a little switch down here somewhere to turn those puppies on. But we figured it out. And then we got 2 portables out there, portable lights that you use at football games, okay, in parking lots, for example. And we threw those up. They run off diesel. They're not too loud. They're okay. And we made it work. So I will say Penn State has been really good about listening to my requests. So that's trying to think outside the box. So that's how we're making it work now. And then in the afternoons, middle distance and distance are inside on Monday and Fridays because we're using the rack, so we don't want to keep shuffling them inside and outside. So those will be inside, and then sprinters will be outside. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday will all be outside. Yeah.
With Wondercow.
Recovery?
Yeah.
So we do recovery on Wednesday afternoon. I think the other recovery that they get are Tuesday, Thursday mornings when they get to sleep in. So they get that recovery of being able to get a more bank of sleep, right? And then Wednesday afternoon, they get to shake it out. I've even tossed sometimes some options here where we may not even get in the water. We may just have a meeting, right? So we're maybe even staying out of the water, or we may be doing some stretching or do yoga or something along those lines. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I know you haven't had your full, January where you're all inside yet, but presumably you might have had some weather events that caused you to be inside so far, or at least you've thought about it. What I'm curious about is what is your maximum number of swimmers per lane if you were?
Well, if we're talking today, it's probably going to be different in a year with these roster caps. So that's going to be a deep dive. Right now, we really haven't had that issue. We had it once. We had lightning, and we were able to get in. And from what I can remember from that one day, we were 4 to a lane on both sides, the yards and the meters.
So when you're outdoors, you're always doing long course meters.
No, actually, that's a good question too. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday will be long course. Monday afternoon, wants to go long course with the sprinters, and then every other practice is gonna be short course. So our lifeguards change up that course.
And what are your numbers this year, and what do you hope to be in the future with men and women?
We're 44 swimmers right now, and so we're waiting to see. I have a spreadsheet to our ADs, as do all the other 30 sports, with maybe the exception of football, because I don't think they need to do it. Uh, and so we're waiting to see what those numbers are going to be. The Big Ten has decided on 30 and 30. So I was on that call with head coaches to decide that. And then, we'll see how Penn State shakes things out. But Pat Kraft is one of the most brilliant ADs I've ever been around. So he wants to make sure that all of our teams are healthy and set up well for the future. So I don't know. I turned it in last week, and they were having a lot of meetings last weekend and this week. So I expect I should hear soon. Yeah.
As a coach, now that's say fire about the experiences. Do you guys feel at all the team like preserve time? You guys just get together and watch fire races or meet in general to see how maybe things that they divide. Well,
So we have Sideline Scout. And so we're working on that. I have Nicole on that because she had that at Texas A&M. So she's figuring out all the licensing and how to get that booted up, because we're only about a month in, right? So we're trying to figure out all that. But yes, we will have that. And then to the point of the recovery question, that is going to be a good time for us to watch video and to spend some time watching that video. It's real easy, though. We don't check our phones during practice to scroll through things, but we'll just take a video, and it's easy just to send it to them, talk it through it with them. But the Sideline Scout, I think, is going to be really beneficial for some of that stuff. So yeah, I think we'll be able to hit that on Wednesdays, and then anytime here on a Saturday. After this meeting, we're usually in a meeting for about 30 minutes. We could spend another 30 minutes. Who wants to stay and watch their videos? And then we can also send it to them so they can see. And I'll touch base on some of the recovery stuff. We have a lot of different things. We have the recovery boots. We have ice baths. We have y'all heard of Fireflies? It's like a TENS system that is like portable. And I point to my knee because when I was at trials with these guys, it was the first time I saw them. It's basically a Velcro strap that goes around whatever they need, okay, to get that electrical stimulation. So we have endless amounts of that. We have a lot more recovery things, and just, for instance, one day in the water to shake things out. We got trainers. Anything else? Cool. All right. College landscape. So we have ours versus NCAA settlement. There's and a lot of you probably know a lot of this, and if you don't, that's okay. We're just learning all about it, right? The judge, she just sent back the settlement for a revision. There were some things she didn't like. We're expecting to get more answers as we get through these coming months, hopefully before the turn of the new year, but we will wait and see. But as we sit here today, conferences are making decisions, and then inside that institutions are going to be making decisions. There's a lot of rumors going out there. I've heard a lot about the SEC. They're talking about the Big Ten SEC having probably the most concise plan right now, moving forward, which is good. And I think, in our world and what I'm seeing that plan is coming to fruition, and we're going to get some answers pretty soon. But there's a lot of layers to this, and we're still trying to understand what that means, because in addition to what that could entail, you have what then happens to NIL, name, image, and likeness. What happens to Alston money? Okay, you always heard about Alston money. That's probably going away, but not going away in the in a bad sense. It's just going to be recategorized. Okay, and then you have COA. That's cost of attendance. That's the percentage of the scholarship you get. It's a percentage of that amount. Okay, and that's whatever that scholarship covers between the tuition, room, board, and fees. Okay, and then that it's a percentage that the athlete gets in money. And then there's some talk in some institutions, like, we've always talked about with kids, hey, I can give you a 50% scholarship. That 50% basically means towards the cost of attendance. You take the full boat of what I just said, tuition, room, board, books, and fees. I didn't say books before. Books is kind of a little weird thing. It's like characterized as a different amount. But anyway, you take that total cost and then you say 50%, and that's 50% of that amount. But now some schools, and I'd even seen it recently, is just going straight up dollar amounts. And that's where you're going to see a phrase like Alston money. That Alston money no longer becomes Alston. It just becomes the money that you'll get added into your dollar amount. It's getting really confusing because, it's just when we're talking about roster caps and we're talking about removing equivalencies, right? Scholarship like numbers, like for Division I swimming and diving, it was 14 on the women's, 9.9 on the men's. And that's essentially going away with all this. All right. And then you have, revenue sharing and versus fundraising. And I think a lot of schools and what they're going to have to do is hit their fundraising, really get after their alumni. That's something I've been highly focused on, especially sending newsletters out to our alums. I did that at Miami and it worked really great. We're able to pull in a lot of money to help fundraise for our program. And it's going to be no different here at Penn State when I reach out to our alums. And then revenue sharing. Revenue sharing is, I would say, most schools are probably going to see football get a lot of that revenue sharing. And quite honestly, I think that's okay because you get taxed on that. All right. And so that's something that we don't want to have to put onto our athletes, is getting taxed for money that you're getting from that revenue share. So I don't have a lot of answers for the college landscape right now, is what I'm really trying to say. But all these schools are working on it. And honestly, I don't know what schools like Miami and mid-major are doing. I just don't have a good pulse on it. I'm trying to stay focused on what we're doing in the Big Ten and at Penn State. So if you were to ask me anything on that, I probably wouldn't be able to tell you because I don't know. I tried to ask one of my former coaching colleagues back there on the basketball team. He's like, we don't know. I don't know anything. So I don't know what else I have on here. Just questions. Again, I had to kind of water this down just a little bit, just to make sure I'm following the rules. So what questions can I answer, or what did you come to learn? Yeah.
Can you tell us anything about burnout and what that looks like in the college level? What are some of the reasons you see make the years most common?
I see in many ways. Okay. I see it with a lot of pressure, and maybe it's self-perceived pressure. Maybe it's pressure from the outside. I've dealt with an athlete who experienced pressure specifically from a coach. I won't get into all the details. Previously, just about putting that pressure on that person. And I think that's something that when you utilize certain resources like our sports psychologists, we can work through the root problem as to why they're feeling the burnout. And I think that's where we start. We find out the why. Okay. And then we try to help and mend and evolve that to see if this is something that is amendable, can evolve, and can get them back the passion that they once had. And, as someone who studies sports psychology, but I would never begin to call myself a sports psychologist, it's something that I like hearing about when they're working with our personnel because they are doing those deep dives. And this one individual I was speaking about, she was able to really understand this is where it came from. Now, how are we going to take some things that we did well and that we liked about swimming and training and competing and get back to that? And so sometimes we do, sometimes we evolve it, sometimes we're able to put some of that stuff in the past, and sometimes we can't. And that's okay too, right? But I think with burnout, you got to get to the root of the problem and whatever that is. And I think really talking through and almost like a Socratic method, just asking questions to pull out the answers instead of trying to tell an athlete, well, not that anyone would do this, right? Don't be burnout, right? Like, this is great. This is a great experience. I think you really rip off the Band-Aid and say, let's get to the heart as to why it's there and what you're feeling and what you're thinking. And so I would say I don't necessarily experience it a lot, but I think it does happen, and I've seen it recently. I don't know if that answered your question, but I think, the bottom line there is figuring out what's causing it. Eh, You're welcome. Over here and then there.
Uh, since they changed the rules and you can start referring to per year, on the club level, a lot of coaches have noticed that athletes and some from the parents, there's a lot more pressure for them to have to perform their sophomore year. It's now you're talking about 15 and 16-year-olds who are essentially freaking out about not hitting the times that colleges want them to be able to do in 2 years. It'd be messaging that we could pass along to the swimmers and the parents of the swimmers to kind of put their mind at ease to not have so much pressure on their sophomore year.
We look at their trajectory. How have they been improving, right? To try to then estimate how they could improve. It's really tough. You're absolutely right. These 15, 16-year-olds. I mean, I literally have men in my office on the recruiting trip saying, I think I'm still growing. I believe it, right? And their doctors are telling them that their growth plates aren't closed yet. I mean, that's crazy. And so that's where we want to say, just calm down, and we look at their trajectory as to how they've gotten to this point to try to estimate where they're going to go from here. It's not a perfect science, but to be and so that some athletes are really, really darn good at that age and some aren't, and they want to get the best look and they want, to put their best foot forward. But that would be my best advice, is to just explain to them that we look at a trajectory. I look at a trajectory. Maybe not all coaches do, you know. Now, it doesn't mean that, we're taking everybody to develop them. Okay. We do want to develop them. We want the fast kids right now. But in the same breath, we got to take a look at that because we know that calendar changed within the last several years. And that was really that we definitely saw a change in our recruiting in that dynamic too. Yeah. Oh, wait, no, over here and then back there.
Should or can athletes do a get on your radar? And what grade should they do this?
So they can send us whatever they want before their sophomore year, June 15th before their sophomore year. We just can't reply to it. We can see it, but we just can't say anything. In some cases, we'll just write back, say we cannot speak with you until June 15th after sophomore year, just so they know that we've read it. But again, we can't say anything to the context of recruiting. So I would say, club coaches, I love talking to club coaches. You guys are all fair game for us to come up to you and talk to us about athletes without us having that contact with the prospect and their parents. So I would say that that's a good avenue too before their sophomore year. And then once June 15th hits, it's kind of full court press, right? It's full tilt, because that's when we're able to give calls, we're able to take visits, talk to athletes, all that good stuff. So that June 15th is going to be critical. I don't know. There's really not a good tried and true way to get on their radar.
It doesn't sound like it's too beneficial for an athlete to be a child before that June 15th point.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing. It's just a matter of they just have to understand the expectation. They're not going to get hardly any feedback, if anything, until we're too. Yeah. Yeah.
What's your goal date for having all of your scholarship money committed for a class?
That's so. As I stand here today, we're still recruiting 2025s, right? Because we're a brand new staff trying to come in, and that last staff wasn't allowed to recruit for a period of time. That's a long story, but just this past year, right, it was through the coaching change. So what we're trying to do is get our 2025s on board and our 2026s. Honestly, we would like to have that money all taken care of by the end of the year. Most of that would come in our November signing. So, and that's with our 2025s, right? So for a commitment to have that money committed to the 2026s, a similar time frame, but we bleed that out into the spring a bit because we know the transfers are going to come uh, open. And so it's not to say that we hold money back, but if we have money available, we may not have spent it already, right? And so if we do have that money available for transfers, then I would say by the spring of well, their junior year. But if it's a transfer, that's a totally different timeline. Yeah.
Bills. So Penn State traditionally like really prides itself on the academic issue and all the athletes you talked about here in the Seattle. And I had a comment in the season for what outside tools or approaches and always progress that like really reinforce the need of the athletic or the academic pools. That was 20 hours of training, but how what styles do you approach trying to make sure your athletes are actually going to class? They're getting your higher hours of sitting in as a or second projects and stuff like that.
So we have two academic advisors. We have a head academic advisor and then an assistant that helps that individual. I also, something that's unique to our staff, I always put someone on my staff that's a liaison, meeting with the athletes. I always consider all freshmen coming in at risk academically. They're really not at risk, but they've never been part of, a college academic schedule combined with 20 hours. And I always tell these athletes, and don't, splice my words here, it's more than 20 hours. But it's not in training. It's the fact that you're going to see an athletic trainer, you're going to study hall hours, you're doing travel. It's a lot more than what 20 hours is. And so to understand that time management piece is important. And then we have a liaison on our staff. It's actually Sean who meets with them every single week to make sure, okay, let me see your grades. Let me see how you're doing. Do you need a tutor? Can we set you up with a tutor? So we'll have tutors. We have priority registration. So now we're able to, and most schools have that. That's not unique to Penn State, but you get to schedule your classes so you can fit it around your practice schedule. Okay. And 9 times out of 10, you can. If not, those Tuesday, Thursday mornings you saw, that's when we do our makeups. So they can go to class and do what they need to do. We have professor letters, and most schools have this as well, where you're going to have a letter that states that they're a student athlete. On the back, it's going to be the schedule. And so then it's going to show when we're departing campus and when we're coming back. So if they need to be gone, the professor knows that. But this is also 1-2 punch there where the athlete gets to go directly to the professor and tell them, I want to do well in your class. I want to set this up right, but I may be gone for a couple days, And so that's going to enable them to have that good relationship and then also get the work done either on the front end or back end. So I think there's a lot of resources that we do provide as far as that goes. And then we obviously have our special needs areas, right? And so if we have an athlete who needs to be tested for ADHD or tested for a learning disability, we have all those resources in place. And then when they are diagnosed, they get all these opportunities that's going to help them succeed. That answer that? Okay, good. Yeah.
What's one major area that you feel like particularly incoming freshmen struggle to adapt to? And if there's some things that they could choose better preparing for at the end?
Budgeting their time. They had typically have a little bit more downtime when they're in high school, but in college it's a little bit different. They don't have as much downtime. Now a lot of these athletes, like they're going to be packed full with all their volunteering, their athletics, their academics in high school. It's just a little bit of a different schedule, especially when you're talking about, we go to Navy, we're leaving on a Thursday for a Friday meet. And so now how are you budgeting your time? How are you studying and fitting all that in addition to making up your schoolwork? I would say it's just time management. And once they get a handle of that and they put time limits on some of that social life activities where sure you can play your Fortnite, you can play your video games, but you got to put a time frame on it, an hour, not 2 or 3. You got to put a time frame on your deep dive in TikTok and the layers that you can go down with that. So I think it's really just time management. And once they get a handle of that, I mean, it's night and day. And they just take off because they feel good because they're taking care of everything, but they're still getting a little bit of an outlet with some of the fun things they like to do too. I go to a football game yesterday.
So tell us about the portal, the transfer portal, especially with a new staff and new program. Do you think Penn State will rely on it, or how to some of the kids maybe at other schools that might want to aspire to go to a bigger school be able to use that portal?
I think the portal, it's different for different sports. If you talk to basketball coaches, they're gonna tell you we're not recruiting any high schoolers. We're going straight to the portal and recruiting the juniors and seniors out of the portal, right? And the only reason I say that is I was talking to our basketball coaches at Miami before I left. So I don't think it's quite to that level in swimming and diving. I don't think the portal is necessarily a bad thing. But it's also a scenario where now they can enter at any time, or excuse me, they can transfer as many times as they want. And so now you have an athlete who could be transferring 3 or 4 times. Why? So you really got to vet through why the transfer is happening. So you got to spend a little bit more time deep diving that and making sure always call that last coach. They will tell you honestly how that athlete was for them. So I think just with the portal, we just have to make sure that we're doing our job in vetting through those athletes. I think there's some great athletes in the portal, and some of them, especially this year, you had some fifth years that just wanted to change, right? They've been at a school for 4 years. They love their experience. They just wanted to go somewhere different, or maybe they're going into a master's program, and Penn State has it, but another school, their last school didn't. So there's a lot of reasons. You just got to do a lot of research, and I think the portal is a good thing. I think it's kind of fun waking up every day looking at see who's in there.
I'm a ASER coach, but moving into the high schoolers. What's it between summer A and summer B? What makes a difference?
Character. Hands down, character. Just who they are as people, their level of integrity. Are they coachable? And that's where we would contact, are they coachable? That is one of the biggest things that we need, right? That you need. And so understanding what goes into that and how they'll respond to feedback and what they'll do with that feedback. We don't want the goggle throwers, right? We want the athletes to say, I know that wasn't good. How can I be better? And so that's something that I would say would really separate one athlete to another. If you tell me all things like that are the same, I don't know.
What about territory as far as recruiting? Do you think you can get the very best Pennsylvania swimmers? Do you look nationwide? Tell us about where the athletes are going to come from Penn State, and maybe where they came from, in the past at Miami when you were there.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I think Pennsylvania can really be tapped by Penn State. I think we need to be the flagship school in the state. And so that's something we already have. So I had my assistant, Ethan, I said, pull together all the club coaches' emails and cell phone numbers, and we're getting ready to embark on that of making club visits. We built it into our budget to make club visits to make sure that we're getting there. We're going to we've already made a plan to show up 3 to 4 deep at the Pennsylvania State meet, because we're able to be, and then I'm going to talk to this with the kids and their parents. We have shutdown periods, but fortunately the Pennsylvania State meet is not part of that, which is really good. So we're going to hit up Pennsylvania. We're also going to do our big web, and we're going to hit around the nation. But we're pulling in Canadians, we're pulling in Brazilians. I had a great pipeline in Brazil. I've been down there a dozen times, and I have great relationships with the coaches down there. And so we have some Brazilians on our team. We have some Chileans on our team. And so we're going to have a mix of domestics and internationals. And we'll see kind of how this roster cap may change that a little bit. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. But for right now, I think no matter what happens with the roster cap and all those things, we're still going to hit Pennsylvania super duper hard. It would be silly not to. I hope this helped. I hope this was informative. But if you have questions, let me know. I'm around for at least a few more hours. So thank you.
Now for the third flashback. We heard from Hollie after a recent meet with Pitt, Penn State, and then we heard her speak at a clinic in Philadelphia area. And now we turn the clock all the way back, and I show some of the OG credentials, it's old guy, of myself, because Hollie and I are paths crossed back in Athens, Ohio, when I was the coach of the Athens Swim Club Otters. So I dusted off my button and I wore it proudly to the meet, and we had a nice visit. And let's hear it for the Athens Swim Club, which has now been changed, but we had a lot of glory days growing up together back in Ohio. This is the podcast called Heavy or Not, the OG Swim Guide. I'm Coach Mark Roderkus, and I apologize for the length of the pod. I didn't expect it to go this long, but I didn't want to split it up into multiple pieces. Plus, I want to be able to release the podcast on a more frequent basis moving forward. So you're listening to Season 2. All the podcasts are available at wasu.org. That's the World Aquatic Federation Schools and Universities, WAFSU.org. Go to the courses area.